Hello and welcome to our eTail series webinar, Embracing Mobile both online and in-store, produced in conjunction with Retail Me Not, the world's largest marketplace for digital offers. I'm Gareth Becker, part of the eTail webinar series team, and I'd like to get things started today by introducing our speaker. Giulio Montemagno is Retail Me Not's Senior Vice President and General Manager outside of North America. In this role, he's responsible for driving the company's international strategy, as well as overseeing operations for their suite of market-leading online brands. Giulio is also the former General Manager of Western Europe for PayPal, where he spent 12 years serving in various senior management roles within its business development, product management, and corporate strategy teams. Now, there are a couple of extra things that I'd like to mention before I hand over to Giulio. Firstly, we will be conducting a live poll during the webinar. We would love you all to get involved. Twice during the presentation, you will see a poll question appear on your screen. You'll then have about 30 seconds to answer, so please do take part while you can. We'll display the results later by email. Secondly, once Giulio has finished his presentation, we'll open the floor to questions, and we'd love to hear from you. So if you'd like to submit a question to Giulio, please do so by using the questions tab in the webinar interface. And finally, the link to the recorded webinar, including the slideshow, will be sent to you via email within the next couple of days. So if you'd like to refer back to anything that you hear today, please do look out for that. And so, with no further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Giulio.
Thank you, Gareth. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. As the title suggests, there are three things that I would like to discuss with you today. The first one is why it makes sense to invest in the development of your mobile offering. The second that we're going to cover is examples, really practical and concrete examples of how to use mobile and promotional strategies to drive footfall in store and generate sales. And the third item is really about how to strike the right balance between personalization technologies and the consumer's desire to be in control of their personal data. I will be providing lots of examples and lots of data using external research, external surveys that we have conducted with some of our partners, as well as publicly available material in terms of data. And I will provide as much as possible a view on how we see the market throughout the various experiences, the various campaigns that we have conducted in the countries where we operate. So before we start with the agenda, just a brief introduction of who Retail Me Not is. I understand that some of you may not be familiar with what we do. We are the largest marketplace for digital offers. We are today present in 6 different countries: the U.S., Canada, the UK, France, Germany, and the Netherlands. And we operate 9 coupon and promotion sites in these 6 countries. We're number 1 in the UK, in France, and in the US, and we have leadership positions in all the other countries. Our mission is very simple. We combine the power of technology and community to deliver savings to the world. And we've built kind of a classic internet marketplace where we bring together consumers and retailers to this marketplace. And in every country we work with 90% of the top 200 retailers and promote the promotional content to millions of consumers across devices, on desktop, on mobile, and on tablet. Some of our numbers: we generated over 3.5, we facilitated over $3.5 billion in global merchant sales in 2013. We have at any point in time, we have over 600,000 offers available from the world's largest brands and retailers. We work, as I mentioned, with a lot of retailers, over 70,000 across the globe. We have almost 26 million email subscribers, and our app has been downloaded 21 million times. An interesting data point is that we have over 650 million visits to our properties over the last 12 months. And of those, 40% are coming from a mobile device. And obviously, this is a key theme of our presentation today. So before jumping into the presentation, I'll stop here and I will ask one of the polling questions. And the question is, how important is investment in mobile to your m-commerce strategy today? 1, not important. 2, slightly important. 3, very important. And 4, crucial. So I believe you can submit your answers, and the results will be distributed at the end of the webinar. Okay, moving on to so let's talk about multi-channel for a minute. So I'm sure that you are familiar with most of the data that I'm going to present, but just in case that you don't have all the latest statistics, I try to put together as many data as I could to kind of paint a picture of where we think the retail industry is going. So we're really approaching kind of what we call the end of linear shopping. If you're familiar with a kind of e-commerce industry of the last 15, 20 years, you look back at what happened in 95, 98, in that period. It was really about kind of a single channel commerce. Consumers could could purchase items or services either going to the physical store or buy things online, and it was really kind of a mono relationship, a straight through relationship with the retailers. Now with moving on to 2008, we are starting to witness probably the most important kind of a secular change in the industry, and it's probably the single largest development since 95, meaning that the proliferation of more and more devices through which consumers can connect and transact to retailers. But these devices there were multiple devices, but they were not necessarily communicating to each other, and they were kind of siloed from one another. Today, as you very well know, consumers have come to expect a truly omni-channel experience where they can communicate, transact with the brands they love, with the retailers they love, and they expect to have a great and consistent experience across the board. Just a few more statistics to corroborate what I just said. 9 out of 10 consumers research online before buying offline. 2/3 of consumers actually start their shopping journey on one channel and finalize it on another. And 31% of consumers visit a store offline before buying online. So if you look at the actual trends, the actual numbers, how is this kind of shift in consumer behavior and consumer expectations actually reshaping the world of retail? If you look at across Europe, e-commerce is growing at least 10 or 12x faster than the classic in-store offline commerce. If you look at the UK, for example, we expect 23% of Christmas shopping in the UK this year to be made online. That's almost 1 of 5 purchases to be completed online, which is simply huge. M-commerce is obviously the fastest growing part of this, and it currently represents almost 20% of online sales in the UK. But obviously, we expect this figure to continue to rise. Some of the growth is obviously coming from a much smaller base, so this is justified. But so if you look at the data more. You dig deeper a little bit in the data and kind of sharing our own experience, which I believe is very similar to the general trends that we're seeing across the industry. This graph here shows the year-over-year traffic growth for us by platform, I would say, between January 2012 and today on voucher codes on our property in the UK. And we observed that mobile and tablet are really the devices that are driving overall growth, while desktop is clearly flat to slightly negative. And so the growth in e-commerce is really coming from mobile and tablets today. And there are 2 important trends that will come to full maturity in 2015. For the first time, mobile search will be bigger than desktop search. In 2015, the majority of search spend, organic traffic, and paid clicks will come from smartphones and tablets, surpassing traditional desktop and laptop search activity for the first time. However, as you very well know, you have to be aware that return on investment on search as you know it on desktop has not reached a similar tipping point. So as we'll see later on in the presentation, kind of the conversion rates on outside of desktop are way lower than what they are on desktop. So this has important consequences. The second trend that will come to full maturity in 2015 is that switching between screens and simultaneous usage of devices will become commonplace and really intrinsic to the way consumers consume content. For the marketers in the audience, this obviously, as you know, will require a very important shift in thinking and focus, requiring that you kind of shift away from channels to really embrace this concept of audience and reach and build campaigns to reach consumers on whatever device they're using. So again, the fact that mobile and tablets are driving e-commerce growth has very, very important consequences on the overall industry. When we we looked at a research that was conducted by WBR, and we saw that retailers seem generally satisfied with their traditional desktop offering. So if you see in the first bar on the far left side of the slide, over 2/3 of marketers feel that they're ahead of their competitors, and only 13% feel that they're kind of lagging behind. Their competitors are lagging behind the industry average. When you ask the same question with regards to mobile, obviously you see a completely different story. And marketers seems to be a lot less confident about the quality of their offering on mobile web, tablet, and on their own apps. And UK retailers are particularly questioning their own offering, and they kind of feel behind the curve across all mobile platforms, possibly because the UK retailers are really comparing themselves more to the US retailers than to other retailers in Europe. French and German retailers don't seem to be so negative when it comes to kind of the appreciation of their mobile offering. But it's very clear that retailers and marketers really understand kind of the magnitude of the challenge, and are really willing to invest in technology as early as possible and really try out new things, even if they're not really sure of the results. If they do not want to kind of lag behind other competitors, and are willing to take risks. So I think this is kind of a very important news for the industry. Well, I was mentioning a minute ago conversion rates. So if you stop for a moment and you step back, and you remember the sheer amount of traffic today that is coming to your properties through mobile devices, or let's say that tablet and smartphones outside of desktop, you see yet another reason why investments in building your mobile technology, your mobile presence are totally justified. If you look at the conversion rates, meaning the number of visits that actually lead to a sale by device, we clearly see a massive difference by platform. And again, if you remember the staggering growth in mobile and in tablet traffic that we just talked about, you realize the magnitude of the problem in terms of missed earnings for you, for retailers. And let me give you some other data points on why we think obviously it's important to invest in mobile. Multi-channel clearly pays off. Another interesting aspect is the actual impact on the average basket size for a multi-channel transaction. So from research from Deloitte, we know that the average kind of basket size, the average, the AOV, average order value for a transaction that has been initiated offline and concluded offline is around 100 euros. A little bit more for a transaction online. And but if you on top of that, you really look at the consumers that have used several channels to complete their shopping or their transaction, you see that those that you see that the average order value really goes up dramatically. So this really contributes to the notion that it really kind of corroborates the notion that consumers are shopping across multiple channels, and this has a clear benefit for retailers on top of the challenges that we just mentioned. But it's fair to say that on average, the industry is still relatively far from offering a truly multi-channel experience. Let me provide a couple of examples. 73% of consumers expect to find the same promotions online and in store. This is a research from Forrester and Accenture. But only 16% of retailers actually offer the same prices online and in store. 50% of consumers expect to be able to buy online and pick up in store, but only 30% of retailers actually offer this functionality. So as you see, the reality is that we still observe a significant gap between what consumers have come to expect and what most of the retailers on average are actually offering. But In conclusion, I think for the first part, I think we're clearly in the first stages of this transformation in retail, and only just scratching the surface. This is some data from Business Intelligence report that was published over the summer, and you really see that the opportunity ahead of us as an industry is really enormous. And mobile kind of centric transaction and mobile-driven payments will drive the growth of multi-channel commerce over the next 5-10 years. So this is a little bit of the kind of the context, the picture of what we have observed. A lot of we share a lot of data that is coming from our own direct experience and from external sources. But what does this actually mean for retailers, and what can retailers do about it? So when we ask the questions to retailers, what are your goals for digital marketing on mobile devices? Well, without a surprise, retailers declare that their primary goal is to drive sales, possibly directly on mobile. But retailers are very much aware that the transaction may take place on different channels. And by the way, surprisingly, it's also interesting to see that we have almost 10% of retailers that do not have a mobile strategy at all. Now, our experience and that of the retailers, our retail partners, is that mobile at this stage, at this precise point in time, is really kind of a discovery tool that in most cases converts in other channels. So the statistics vary, but in our experience, we have about 15-20% of the transactions that are actually initiated on a mobile device that are finalized on the mobile device. Around 30 or 40% of transactions, again, originated on a mobile device, will convert in store, and the rest, 20% on desktop and 15% on tablet. Obviously, these statistics will vary depending on the retailers. But again, when we look at the reality of things, so we talk about mobile a lot, but mobile is not, in most cases, the channel where the final transactions will happen. Consumers use mobile to get product information, find prices, or find a store nearby, but most of the time the purchase will happen on another platform. Again, mobile is I think this is probably, if you were to take away one thing of today's webinar, I think this is the key concept. Mobile is a discovery device that converts in other channels. Now, if we pause for a second, I think this concept has two important implications for us in the industry. The first one is that consumer behavior today is already very much about multi-screen and multitasking, and retailers have to develop the capabilities to target and engage consumers across devices and do it at scale. The second implications of this is that retailers have to be able to harvest data from the consumer activity on multiple devices and derive powerful insights. This obviously is a big challenge because the technology is not quite there. We have seen some companies like Facebook and Google experimenting in this area. But the challenge, as we know, given that we've all run multi-channel marketing campaigns, is that we obviously need to link the data in an effective way, in a way that makes sense, in a way that makes the data exploitable for marketing purposes. So, what are some of the possible solutions? Let me share with you what our experience has been so far, and the 4 areas where we're going to make pretty sizable investments in 2015 and probably over the next 2 or 3 years as well. So the first one is to really kind of enable our retail partners to power different promotional strategies. Second one is to leverage geolocation and geolocalization technologies. The third item of our strategy is to really use data intelligently to personalize the shopping experience. And the fourth one is to try to iterate and finding solutions to close the loop at the point of sale. So let me give you, again, practical examples of what we have done and how we have helped retailers achieve their goals on mobile. The first one is, again, to enable the retailers to power different promotional strategies. So we know that consumers spend a disproportionate amount of their time on their mobile phones, so we all do. But often, as we just said, they often conclude transactions on other platforms. So we must then enable retailers to reach consumers and expose their brands in new formats. which are visually much more appealing and more suitable for mobile consumptions. We know today from research that 10% of consumers discover a brand for the first time on mobile. And if you look at millennials, this number goes up to 30%. Imagine 1/3 of your millennial audience actually find out about your brand on a mobile device. So it's vital that you present your brand in a certain way to this type of consumers. In the example of Retail Minot, we have expanded our offering and our formats to include product showcases where we give a lot of exposure to a particular retailer's products, and digital circulars. As you know, you might be familiar with this term, but digital circulars are actually the paper-based circulars or leaflets that a lot of retailers still use. That we are in the process of trying to digitize as much as possible of these promotional content, and to bring it over to the app or to our mobile web format, so that consumers can actually interact with these brands on this format, kind of on this digitized format of the digital circulars. The second item that we're working on is a geolocalization, and we've been experimenting with a couple of things. The first one is geofencing, and the second one is our beacons. And so this has given us the possibility to test the solution both at a macro level and a micro level. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, geofencing is like a virtual fence that kind of surrounds a certain area. In this case, a shopping mall. So geofencing basically enables retailers to push information and promotions to consumers' mobile phones within a certain area, and as I said, in this case, a shopping mall. In the U.S., we have kind of geofenced over 450 malls, and within these 450 malls, we're talking to 30,000 stores. We've just launched geofencing 2 months ago in the UK, and we have geofenced over 500 areas in the countries. And over 350,000 users have activated the location tracking features on their phone. So the good news is that in our experience, 51% of consumers that receive an offer near a store are more likely to enter and actually buy something in that store. Again, we're still very much in the early innings of this, but the idea is to continue to experiment with these technologies and to make sure that we push content that is as contextually as relevant as possible for our consumers. Let me give you a brief example of a kind of a case study real quick of what we did with a US brand called Ashley Stewart. This is a campaign that we ran last year, January 16 and 26. So Ashley Stewart is a kind of a mid-market, readily accessible kind of fashion brand. And historically, they've worked with Retail Minot in the US primarily online only, actually exclusively online, and they wanted to drive traffic to their store. So we partnered with them. We launched our first multi-channel campaigns with a kind of geofencing as well in the 400 shopping malls that I just mentioned. And during that period, interestingly, their market share for Ashley Stewart increased by 41%, peaking at 73% on certain days, versus an average of 15% before the campaign. In-store AOV, back to the kind of the research, the survey results, the research results that we just discussed, was actually 52% higher than the online AOV. And interesting for Ashley Stewart, in-store sales accounted for 45% of total merchant sales during the offer period. So really, we proved to this retailer that we have been able to drive traffic in store, and actually the in-store experience wouldn't come at a detriment of the online experience. The other example that I can provide is geolocalization techniques is called Beacon, kind of what we call geolocalization technology at a micro level. A beacon, for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with this, is a very simple piece of hardware that is located within a store that pushes information to a consumer mobile phone as when the consumer is within the store. From our research, we have seen that 63% of consumers that actually receive an offer while inside a store are more likely to make a purchase. So to be honest, we're not as advanced with beacons as we are with more kind of geofence campaigns, but let me give you an example of what we're doing. So we've partnered with a company called Gimbal, and we are using their vehicles and determine what kind of traffic interface with their vehicles in the New York City area in Manhattan. Hopefully you can see the slide. The black dots represent the location of the beacons. The yellow dots are the people with the Retail Me Not app installed that actually walk by these beacons. The larger yellow dots indicate a higher concentration of people that walk by a particular store at the same time. So the results actually obviously indicate that there is a lot of traffic near these beacons and validate that obviously we should experiment working with certain retailers and sending marketing alerts for specific retailers to specific consumers. Now, so this is, we have obviously a number of campaigns running on Beacon. Obviously, we will be happy to share results as soon as we have them. But this shows a clear potential, a clear additional advantage that geolocalization technologies can bring to marketers and to retailers worldwide. So let me pause for a second and let me ask you the second before we jump to the third strategic kind of weapon that we're going to look into in 2015. Let me ask you kind of one of the second polling question. When would you consider investing in micro-location beacon offers for your retail business? One, we're already using beacon offers. B, we will be investing from now over the next 12 months. And C, in 1 or 2 years from now. Okay, thank you. Hopefully you have time to submit your answer. Okay, moving on quickly to number 3. Oh, sorry, there was a third point. Probably we need to reopen the poll. There was a kind of two additional possible answers. One was 3 or 4 years, and the other one was not at all. Sorry, let me read that again to you real quick. So when would you consider investing in micro-location beacon offers for your retail business? Number 1, we're already using beacon. Number 2, over the next 12 months. Number 3, in 1 or 2 years. Number 4, in 3 or 4 years from now. Number 5, not at all. Okay, so hopefully you have time to submit. So let me move on to the third piece of our strategy, which is leverage data for a more kind of relevant experience. So we've invested significantly this year to improve our tools and deliver on the promise of better targeting and segmentation, both to our consumers and retailers. We have aggressively ramped up the ways we're targeting our users, location, affinity, demographics, to really kind of focus on delivering the most relevant content to them, to our consumers at the most relevant time. We've done that in 2 ways. The first one is to really capture as many explicit signals as possible, where we openly asked our consumers to indicate what their favorite stores were, the favorite brands, the safe products, and the previous purchase that they made. And the second one is to monitor implicit signals, user location, the products that a consumer has viewed but has not necessarily purchased. And based on this data, and we have kind of tried to start a conversation where some of the messaging that we sent through our kind of app notifications on the users' phones were really based on what is most relevant for the consumers. And here you see how some of the examples with some of the retailers that we've been partnering with. And obviously this is a key topic of today's webinar. We have learned that transparency is essential. Transparency really matters, and it's really kind of a give and take approach. So PwC ran a survey, and we know that 73% of consumers are willing to share personal information depending on the benefits that we get in return. And 80% of these consumers are willing to share personal information if a company asks upfront and clearly states the use that this company is going to make of this personal information. So we have learned a kind of a transparent approach to collecting data definitely reduce consumer churn around privacy. And in our experience, to respect this desire for transparency, it's very important to put the consumers in the driver's seats. Consumers have to be in control. And for the consumer, it's not just about the choices of opting into certain messages. It's about being able to have the experience that they want on the device that they want. And consumers, in our experience, have reacted extremely positive to this approach. New users coming on the app are averaging 17 store favorites, meaning that have proactively indicated at least 70 brands that they love. 25% of our users across devices are saving offers that they can come back to, and they're truly using our platforms as discovery tools as they plan to shop. And location is 65% of our app users have enabled location tracking on their phones. So these are real signals that consumers understand and appreciate the strategy of transparency. And finally, the fourth area we're going to work on in 2015 and beyond is to continue to try to find solutions to close the loop at point of sale. As I mentioned again, mobile is and will continue to be a device that will convert in other channels. And today we estimate that at least 30–40% of the transactions are actually closed in store. The problem is that we don't have yet the optimal technology to close a transaction at point of sale. So we've been experimenting with barcodes, unique codes, single-use codes to really try to, again, close the loop and bridge the gap between the consumer's mobile phone and the retailer POS system at point of sale. So this is something that we'll definitely continue to invest on. In conclusion, and based on our experience and based on the data that we've come across and the many conversations that we have with our consumers and with all the retailers that we have the pleasure to do business with, let me offer a few suggestions. The first one is it's very important to offer a great and simple experience on any device. So today, I still think that tablet and mobile web and mobile apps are still very much an afterthought, and retailers are still overwhelmingly focused on desktop. So I would really urge you to focus on delivering a great and simple experience on any device, because that's where the traffic is very much moving away from desktop. The second thing, and I know that this is kind of technologically very challenging, but to make the experience as consistent as possible, anytime, anywhere. The third item, as we just discussed, is to make the experience as relevant, as personal as possible, but be very transparent with the users, be very open about and upfront about the use of the data that you're going to make. And this is very much still a journey. So we have initiated, we're still in the very early innings or very early stages of these journeys, and we really have to help the consumers along these journeys. In our experience working with retailers, coupons and promotions really do help and really incentivize consumers to finalize actions on new devices. So this is all I wanted to share with you today. Thank you very much for attending. Hopefully I've been able to provide some food for thoughts and some meaningful data. I guess now we have the time for some questions.
Thank you so much for that, Giulia. That was really fantastic, really informative. And we have had quite a few questions in actually, and we're just going to pick up on a couple of the ones that we've seen from a few people. So one of the questions we have is about these trends in multi-channel. How do you anticipate them changing over the next 5 to 10 years?
So how did we anticipate that, or say it again?
How do you anticipate these trends in the multi-channel experience changing over the next few years?
Well, it's really based on conversation with consumers and the way they are interacting with their devices and in the shopping experience. And actually, it's going to be even more complex and way more complicated than it is today, because today most of the transactions occur in store or mobile or kind of classic smartphones on tablet. But obviously we're seeing the rise of kind of in the Internet of Things or kind of multiple devices that are always on, always connected. So obviously, we're going to see consumers finalizing transactions and purchasing items from their cars, from their refrigerators, from their TV, from a variety of other devices that we haven't specifically talked about today, but this is very much a rising trend. So I believe that consumers have come to expect to be able to shop and access information in a very consistent manner, regardless of the device that they have in their hands at that precise moment. So this is the way we're looking at that. And to be honest, this shift to mobile, this shift to away from desktop is something that has really surprised us as well. We had seen that coming, but we certainly didn't anticipate that growing in triple digit in 2015, and it really took us by storm, to be honest.
That's great, Giulio. Thanks. That's really interesting. And so the next question is about personalization. What do you think is the best way to personalize this kind of offering?
I think, as I mentioned, is to keep it simple. Consumers don't want to be overwhelmed with too many choices. I think it would be to give the chance to and there are many examples out there of companies that do that very well, to ask the consumers up front, what are the retail brands you're interested in? When can we send you messages? And really ask 2 or 3, 4 different, 4 simple questions without kind of inundating the consumers with choice, and really be smart about the way that we collect the data implicitly. So if you are away from a shopping mall, obviously it's totally relevant to send you messages asking you to go shop in that shopping mall, or if you're in a cab, you're away from your computer, you're accessing from your desktop, it's totally relevant to send you information that you cannot really be consumed effectively on your desktop. So it's really a combination of keeping it simple, be upfront with the users, asking them some few and simple and relevant questions, and the third one is to really leverage technology to collect the implicit data.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And the last question we're going to do today is actually about beacon offers. And you've been running this in the US for some time. Are there any trends that you've seen in the US from the beacon offers that you're expecting to see may also transfer over to Europe?
I believe so, yes. We're in very, very early stage of this. It's still a test, as I mentioned, and you see the test that we're running in New York City. But I do see the same. I totally expect the same trends that we're seeing in the U.S. to apply to the UK at least. The consumers' characteristics are fairly similar. The preliminary response we've had from consumers around beacons has been overwhelmingly positive. Obviously, it really comes down to the type of relationships that retailers have with their own consumers, and how these retailers want to partner with companies like Retail Minot or others to push this relevance message to consumers. So I don't have a lot to share, as I mentioned, in terms of data at this point. I'd be more than happy to share this data once we have finalized our test. But so far the feedback that we got from retailers and from the consumers who tested this technology was overwhelmingly positive. But again, it comes down to the relevancy of the communication that you send them while they shop in store. And by relevancy of the communication, I mean, just to provide one more concrete example, is that if you see a consumer that is dwelling in a particular area of the store and is looking at, for example, at sneakers, and the consumer is not really moving away from that area, probably is undecided, you may want to push a particular offer to that consumers to convince that specific consumers to finalize the transaction and to purchase the sneakers that he or she has been looking at.
Yeah. That's superb, Giulio. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer those questions. I'd like to say a massive thank you to you for joining us for this webinar. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And I'd also like to say thank you to everyone who has joined us today for this eTail series webinar. There were a few questions that we didn't have time to answer, If you asked a question, we didn't have time to get to it, then I'd just like to reassure you that we will get back to you. Well, I should say someone from Retail Me Not will get back to you by email after the event. And just one final reminder, we will be sending this recorded webinar out to you by email during the next couple of days. So please do look out for that. And other than that, that's about all we have time for. So thank you very much, and we will see you next time.